You start seeing that history is literally changing right under our eyes. Recent history, it starts just being wiped out. We know nothing about it. It is weird, people. Things are getting really freaky and very, very weird.
Okay, I need you to hear this, because something massive has just been uncovered beneath the pyramids, and almost no one is talking about it. They've just discovered something insane beneath the pyramids, and it literally just happened 2 weeks ago. I want you to see this, because using advanced scanning tech from orbit, scientists detected colossal artificial structures buried deep beneath the Giza Plateau. We're talking symmetry, scale, geometry, nothing natural about it. So they turned their focus to the base of the Pyramid of Khufu, and what they found changes everything. No tomb, no forgotten chamber. This was something else entirely. On March 15th, 2025, a team of researchers presented the results of a deep scanning project beneath the Giza Plateau. Buried more than 600 meters underground, the scan revealed a huge system. 8 massive pillars, arranged symmetrically, surrounded by spiral contours, like a staircase or maybe a coil, descending deep into the earth. Below that, 2 enormous cube-shaped voids. That's not natural, that's intentional. And it doesn't stop there. The formation stretched nearly 2 kilometers underground. They're aligned, structured, and they're clearly not random. For context, this scanning method tracks how radar waves shift through solid stone based on vibration. It's usually reserved for earthquakes and volcanoes, but at Giza, the results didn't match anything we've seen before. To eliminate bias, the data was fed into an AI trained to identify geometric anomalies, and what it found beneath the plateau, no match with natural formations anywhere on Earth. At this point, there's still no official word from Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities, no press release, no televised statement, but the images are out there, and the implications are huge. Because if these formations are real, then we have to start asking deeper questions. It's becoming clearer with every scan. The pyramids weren't just built where they happened to stand. They were positioned over something. Something we were never meant to see, and maybe something the ancient Egyptians didn't build, but used. There's something about the layout of these underground structures that doesn't feel accidental. The geometry is too clean, the spacing is too exact, and when you realize it all sits directly beneath one of the most iconic structures on Earth, you can't help but feel like this was built with purpose, a very specific one. Some researchers have been saying it for years. Maybe the pyramids were never meant to be tombs at all. Maybe they were functional, part of a larger system, and not just any system, an energy system. It sounds out there, but think about it. Nikola Tesla once proposed the Earth could be used to transmit power wirelessly through resonant frequencies. Now look at what's buried under Giza. Vertical shafts that resemble coils, giant voids like capacitor chambers, and tons of granite, a piezoelectric material that literally produces electricity under pressure. At first, I thought it was a stretch, but then I saw the patterns. The spiral formations under Khufu's pyramid. They look almost identical to modern conductive pathways, and the entire underground network aligns with major magnetic grid points on Earth. The kind that ancient cultures seem to know about without ever having satellites or sensors. Even ancient Egyptian texts refer to powerful forces beneath the sacred stone. Back then, people read that as mythology. But what if it wasn't? And here's where it gets crazy. The coordinates of the Great Pyramid down to the 9th decimal are 29.9792458 degrees north. That number, it's an exact match to the speed of light in meters per second, 299,792,458. Now, that could be a coincidence, but it's a hard one to ignore. No other ancient structure on the planet comes close to that kind of precision. Not one. So what are we really looking at? Because when you put all this together, it doesn't feel like a royal tomb. It feels like a system, something meant to resonate with the Earth itself, something built to do more than just stand the test of time. And I don't think we've even scratched the surface. The deeper I go into this data, the harder it is to believe we're just dealing with a monument. These underground structures don't just exist, they're positioned. The layout follows invisible lines that stretch far beyond the pyramid itself, lines that intersect with magnetic nodes, planetary energy grids, and even astronomical alignments. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The The Great Pyramid isn't just standing anywhere. It sits almost exactly at the geographic center of all Earth's landmass. It's aligned with true north, within 3/60ths of a degree. That's tighter than most satellites could pull off without software corrections. But the crazy part is what's beneath the surface. The newly scanned structures underneath Khafre's pyramid, they mirror the same kind of alignment. The underground shafts and pillars line up along an axis that cuts directly through ancient temples, even the Sphinx. And if you extend that line globally, it hits Teotihuacan in Mexico. It reaches Angkor Wat in Cambodia. It passes through Nabta Playa in southern Egypt. That's not a random scatter, that's a network. Now, here's something else. In geology, there's a principle called resonant frequency, basically the natural vibration of materials. Granite, which is found through the pyramids and possibly these underground formations, is piezoelectric. You apply pressure or sound and it creates an electric charge. Now, combine that with spiral patterns, vertical shafts, and massive chambers deep in the earth. That doesn't just look like design, it looks like a tubing mechanism, something built to interact with frequencies coming from deep within the planet. Even the materials above ground tell a story. The original casting stones of the Great Pyramid were white Tura limestone, incredibly smooth and reflective, almost like insulation or shielding. And when you connect all these dots, materials, measurements, orientation, it doesn't feel like ritual or symbolism anymore. It feels like engineering, advanced, intentional, and maybe even global. I'm not saying this was a functioning energy grid, but I'm not saying it wasn't. Because if this thing was built to interact with energy, whether from the earth or the sky, then it wasn't made for ceremony. It was made for function. And that function might not be entirely in the past. What's coming to light beneath the Giza Plateau might sound unbelievable, but when I started digging into the records, I realized the clues have been here the whole time. Back in 1852, something called the Inventory Stela was uncovered near the Great Pyramid. It's one of the only surviving ancient texts that directly mentions structures existing before Khufu's reign. According to the inscription, the pyramid wasn't built as a tomb. It was built to protect something sacred that was already beneath it. Mainstream archaeologists called it a later forgery. They dismissed it, but the stela describes underground chambers, temple foundations, and structures older than the pyramids themselves. Now, fast forward to today, and we're seeing those same underground shapes revealed in modern scans, right where the stela said they'd be. But it doesn't stop there. In 1993, Egyptologist John Anthony West teamed up with geologist Thomas Dobecki to conduct a seismic study around the Sphinx. What they found? Anomalous subsurface features right beneath the pause, indicating a chamber buried over 12 meters deep. The data was solid. They presented it, but authorities shut the project down. No excavation was ever allowed. To this day, that chamber has never been explored. Then there's the 1978 case. Dr. Louis Caporet and his team claimed they discovered a sealed room inside the Great Pyramid, filled with crystalline objects. Instruments, maybe. They reported it to the Antiquities Authority, and suddenly, everything stopped. Access was denied. Documentation vanished. It's a pattern I've seen again and again. Discover something important, then watch it disappear. But this isn't just politics, it's in the architecture too. Inside the Great Pyramid, there are sloped shafts that go nowhere, granite-lined corridors that serve no funerary purpose, blocked passages that descend far deeper than necessary. And this is important, no mummies have ever been found inside, not one. Even the sarcophagus in the king's chamber, it's rough, unmarked, empty. So I have to ask, if it wasn't a tomb, then what was it? Herodotus, Pliny the Elder, and others all described hidden vaults and mechanisms beneath the site. They were called myths. But with everything I've seen, it feels a lot more like suppressed history. Because this place wasn't just built to impress, it was built to conceal. And now, for the first time, we're starting to see what it's been hiding. At some point, you realize coincidence just doesn't explain this anymore. The more I looked into ancient structures around the world, the more I kept seeing the same patterns. Same shapes, same alignments, same underlying logic. In the pyramid complex at Giza, it's not just part of the pattern, it might be the key to the entire thing. Let's start with where it sits. The Great Pyramid is located at the geometric center of Earth's landmass. Draw a line through its meridian, and it splits the continents almost perfectly, east to west. It's not the tallest ancient structure, but it's easily the most precisely placed. That alone tells me this wasn't guesswork. This was global awareness, possibly even planetary-level coordination. Now, zoom out. At Teotihuacan in Mexico, the Pyramid of the Sun is aligned with the Pleiades. The pyramids at Giza align with Orion's belt. At Angkor Wat in Cambodia, the layout mirrors the constellation Draco. Over on Easter Island, the Moai statues all face inward, following energy lines some researchers call ley lines, the same invisible paths that intersect directly under Giza. These aren't isolated anomalies, they're pieces of a planetary map, and the similarities don't stop with placement. The stonework itself is next level. At Giza, granite blocks weigh anywhere from 2.5 to 15 tons. In the King's Chamber, some exceed 50 tons. Cut and placed so precisely, you can't even slip a razor blade between them. At Pumapunku in Bolivia, blocks are carved with angles and grooves that modern engineers still can't fully replicate. In Baalbek, Lebanon, stones over 800 tons, lifted and stacked with no cranes, no pulleys, and no explanation. And here's what almost no one talks about: vibration. Giza, Baalbek, Angkor, they all use materials like granite, basalt, and limestone, materials known for their acoustic and piezoelectric properties. These weren't just building materials, they react to sound and pressure. They resonate. In the King's Chamber, certain tones create standing waves that physically vibrate the air and the stone. That's not myth, that's measured physics. Confirmed by musicians, engineers, even teams at NASA. And across all these sites, the same math keeps showing up. Phi, pi, the golden ratio. Not just in decoration, but in structural proportions. These are harmonics, geometry designed to hold or move energy. The deeper I go, the clearer it gets. These weren't built just to be seen. They were built to function.
If the news that we have coming from the media is fake, imagine how wrong all of our history is. And all of this, the fake news and this potentially fake history, is just adding to the great human puzzle and making us even more confused about who we are, where we come from, and why we're here. You know, institutions keep telling us that the ancients were primitive, and they looked something like this. And they built countless megalithic structures with their very primitive tools, like we can build them today. And they left behind these incredible places from times that we cannot remember. And we have no idea when these things actually happened. Some of them we speculate, and we're probably very wrong. And they dragged large blocks up mountains and built platforms because they had nothing better to do. They got together and built giant things like this because they needed to bury some guy. And you go to Mount Sharia in Siberia, and that's just ridiculous. I mean, look at the size of these blocks and these structures in Siberia. Realize that wherever you go in the world, there are mysterious ancient civilizations that weird things, and we really don't know much about the motive. We recognize what they've done. We're surprised by what they've done. Carving entire cities out of bedrock like this, platforms like this, and underground structures like this that are covered in Egypt just to hide it. And Borobudur, which is just obviously such a powerful resonating thing. Anyone that knows anything about sound and resonance takes one look at this and go, okay, I know exactly what they're doing here. What's interesting, as you may have noticed, many of these places, if not all of them that you've just seen, and there are countless more, all of them seem to be in the Northern Hemisphere. And this is why all cathedrals, all major churches, all major castles around the world are always built on very powerful energy lines, ley lines, very energetic places around the world.
As far as I know, this kind of sound frequencies have never ever been measured anywhere on planet Earth that we know of. That brings me to the Earth grid, because it seems that all these ancient sites on Earth, Adam's Calendar, the Great Pyramids, Pumapunku, they all seem to be built on these nodal points, these energy points that have, there's Adam's Calendar right there, there's Giza. And this is really interesting because there seems to be some sort of an energetic code encoded into planet Earth that's mirrored from the sky. And why do we know it's mirrored from the sky? Because the Sumerian texts tell us. And this is not a Zechariah Sitchin translation, by the way. This comes from the Shoyan collection. And this is what it says. In the distant days, in those days after destinies had been decreed, after An, who was Anu, and Enlil, his son, had set up the regulations for heaven and earth. That's interesting. Regulations for heaven and earth. Enki, the exalted knowing God, by the rules for heaven and earth, the fixed rules, he set up the cities. So they're suggesting that there's a grid of energetic rules in the sky that is mirrored on earth, and they set up the cities on earth mimicking or mirroring this energy grid in the sky. So this points us, David Wilcock first actually discovered this when he started talking about these military emblems and these bands that are encoded. This information is encoded into these emblems. They call it the rules. Remember? The rules. The fixed rules for heaven and earth. And here we have, the military calls these bands around the earth the rules. They don't know where they come from, but they've always been there. Some sort of an energetic grid around planet Earth. Well, this is deeply encoded stuff, people. So the fixed rules, the energy grid around the Earth is actually encoded in the modern military emblems. All of them.
And we now know that all these ancient sites are just giant machines. The stone circles are the trigger point to make us realize that all these ancient structures were just giant machines built to generate energy. For what? That remains the mystery. We know that these are machines because sometimes photographs like this show us that energy is still coming out of these giant machines. Stonehenge, very obvious energy device, and then these ancient sites in Egypt are just technology on a gigantic scale. The obelisk rings like a bell, and you realize it's an antenna. And when you start looking at these structures in Egypt, you realize too many pillars, not enough space. This is not for praying and offering food and going to pray to the gods and all that nonsense. This is all just giant technology. There you've got a beautiful amplification chamber with ringing pillars in front of it on a pedestal, and you realize that these are just templates for giant circuit boards. And these guys are just building these energy devices on a scale that we can't do today because we don't have enough money and we have no idea how to do it. And they were doing things that we can't even imagine today. Giant circuit boards, macro processors, and then devices like this, obviously. And you realize that we're dealing with a time in human history that was very, very different from our lives today. And when you go to South America, Sacsayhuaman, it's just another circuit board on top of a mountain. There's another look at it. Borobudur, Indonesia, just amplifying sound frequencies, shooting it up into the sky with a central beam at the top. And this all takes us to Caesar technology. Caesar technology that was only introduced to humanity in 2009, as opposed to laser beams. Caesar beams, infinitely more powerful. But it seems that human sound was used to amplify and start these circuit boards. Even the Parthenon in Greece, that was an ancient circuit board. It's really badly destroyed. And they had these amphitheaters. They squeeze a bunch of people in there, fill them with fear, make them clap their hands and whatever they do, and all these religious sites as well. All that energy gets channeled down these vibrating pillars and into the circuit board, and it starts the circuit board through sound. And we find these circuit board amphitheater connections all over the world. Amphitheaters, circuit boards, whatever they were doing with that energy remains a mystery. There's another amphitheater connected to a circuit board on top of the mountain there. You can see it badly destroyed. Here's another one in North Africa, in Algeria. Here the circuit board the amphitheater is right in the heart of the ancient circuit board. And this doesn't stop there. The secret sound activation continues in medieval times and continues in modern times. Temples have just become churches. And you will see the importance of the structures of these churches with the conical towers, the cone-shaped tools that focus the sound into Caesar beams. This stuff is just so brilliant. Our sound is being harvested as energy. It's that simple. Anytime you build a circle, pyramids, obelisks, or domes and cathedral towers, these are all harvesting devices for amplifying and harvesting sound and focusing sound. And this is why all cathedrals, all major churches, all major castles around the world are always built on very powerful energy lines, ley lines, very energetic places around the world. Every time there's a Catholic church cathedral, it's always on a very strategic point. And this is why the mystery of the medieval cathedrals is such an important thing to crack. Architects today just marvel at how these guys built it. With the tools they had in the year 1000 or whenever it was 10 something, when they built these in the 10th, 11th, 12th centuries, we couldn't build it today with those kind of tools. We'd struggle to build it today with modern tools. This is just spectacular. Have a look at the inside. It's so obvious what's going on here. Giant acoustic chamber with a dome on top of it, with vibrating pillars from the resonance of the people clapping their hands or their fear or shouting or singing, whatever they were doing, going up these pillars into the dome. And what's on top of the dome outside of the cathedral are these spires that send the frequencies up into the sky. I mean, this is just so obvious what's going on here. But it gets even better. Now you start looking at the extra features in these cathedrals, and you realize that they're also using the shape of light that amplifies the acoustic effect inside the chamber. Can you see the shape of these windows? Circular, very important, not square, circular or oval, etc. And we start seeing very obvious magnetron-shaped windows. And once you know that light and sound are inextricably connected, if you send light through a magnetron shape, it will create a magnetron effect. The shape of the window will take the frequency of the light and amplify it because it's in the shape of a magnetron. It's spectacular. So the light from outside goes through the magnetron structures into the church, into the cathedral. It amplifies it because the cathedral is just an ambient chamber. And now you got this magnetron amplification of the light that shoots out the spires and through the top of the cathedral. It's like laser transfer. You can take the information of an egg from a salamander or a lizard, you put a laser beam through a fertilized lizard egg, and you point the laser at the infertile frog egg, and the frog will become a lizard. The light takes the information and deposits it from one to the other. That's what happens. The light comes in through the window, takes the information of the light and amplifies it inside a chamber. Magnetron-shaped windows in cathedrals is suddenly a dead giveaway that this is very, very advanced technology that we're only waking up to now. Once you realize what's going on, we go, oh my God, we are so bloody dumb. We are just like literally lambs to the slaughter. We're just being lied to, abused, eaten, slaughtered, tortured. This is a woman by the name of Annie in Sweden that took this picture of a church. Look at that beautiful torus. Look at the energy coming out of that, creating a torus effect. As every now and then it just shows itself to us very obviously. And we suddenly realize that city grids in cities are just the modern day circuit boards generating huge amounts of sound. Human beings never stop making a noise. Cities are constantly noisy, keep pushing up sound into the sky through the high skyscrapers. We are sources of energy because we never stop freaking making a noise. And suddenly when Morpheus holds up the battery in the Matrix and he says, we are the source of energy, you go, I get it, dude. I finally understand what you mean. When the guys made the Matrix, they knew exactly what they were talking about. Wherever they got their information from is very, very interesting. And that brings me back to places like Bologna. These hundreds of towers that have now been destroyed, gone. This is a very, very early picture of Bologna with many of the towers that have already been gone. But look at the early image, the drawing from 1700s of Bologna. There's a dome over the city. There's a wall and a dome over the city. What's going on here?
In Judaism, we see the 72 names of God. In ancient Egyptian, Osiris was dismembered into 72 pieces by God's lords of the underworld until he was reassembled. In Hinduism, there's a famous battle between 72 jinns in the Quran. There's 72 mentioned all the time. Most famously that I had ever heard was there's 72 virgins waiting for martyrs who died for the cause. In Buddhism, the largest Buddhist temple in the world has 72 of these bell-like structures outside of it called stupas. We're following a breadcrumb path of coincidence, and what could these coincidences be guiding us to? Why are there 360 degrees in a circle? Somebody had to have picked that at some point in our history, and I have hosted out at the Integratron these talks and lectures, and I've had mathematicians and architects and people that use geometry in their algorithms and their research all the time, and of course everyone is familiar with a circle having 360 degrees, but to date no one has known why there's 360 degrees. A circle is 360 degrees because of a math system called sexagesimal math. We are more comfortable with the idea of decimal math, because that's base 10 math. Most of the world is now following base 10 math on the metric system. Base 10 math makes sense to us because we have 10 fingers and 10 toes, and it's very easy to do math. We're thinking in terms of sixes or 60s. It doesn't seem so organic to us, but hopefully I'm going to show you that it actually is. But that's why a circle has 360 degrees, is it is a function of 6 triangles with a 360-degree laid over it, and each one of those triangles at its core touching the middle is 60 degrees. So 60 becomes, and that's what sexagesimal means, is base 60 math. Why do we measure time by 60? So even though we have to go back in time to find out where a 360-degree circle came from, we are using a lot of sexagesimal math today in our everyday lives. So we measure time by 60 seconds to a minute, 60 minutes to an hour. If you go around the world and travel, you're very likely to find different measuring systems, meters and miles and kilometers. But if you're a boat captain or a plane pilot, the world is divided into nautical miles, and 1 degree nautical mile is 1/60th. 1 degree of latitude equals 60 nautical miles, or break it down into 6 nautical mile increments. So our whole planet, we're measuring time, and we're measuring our planet officially by functions of 60. Sacred geometry is described as a function of circles, but if you really look at it in these little flower petals, just pick one of these flower petals for yourself, and you will see, well, you won't know this, but that arc that makes that flower petal is exactly 60 degrees. That's really important to sacred geometry, is that you get that arc correct of 60 degrees of arc. Buckminster Fuller is called one of the greatest researchers and minds of the 20th century, and he said 60-degree math, and he even coined his own term, he called synergetics, reveals nature's behaviors both physically and metaphysically. And he went on to say, because society does not understand the significance of 60-degree geometry, we may conclude that society does not understand nature. I hope to guide you down a path where you are going to understand and recognize how significant 60 degree is, and so much of your life and your surroundings and the nature around you is based on 60-degree math. This is a form that Buckminster Fuller did not discover, but he did name the vector equilibrium. And he wrote 2 huge books about this shape alone, called Synergetics 1 and 2. And if you see that white center, it has 12 vectors radiating out of it. They're all exactly the same length, and they're all offset exactly the same from each other of 60 degrees. Buckminster Fuller came to believe that this is the matrix of creation, that this is the geometry. If physicists are right in telling us that our universe is geometric in nature somehow, Buckminster Fuller argued that this is that geometry, the vector equilibrium. So how did we get to the 60? How did humanity arrive at the 60? Well, that became a function of 12. If you take 12 and multiply it 5 times is how you get 60. And this is a counting system that's still taught in India and other parts of the world to school children. But rather counting just each individual finger, you use one hand and your thumb becomes a pointer, and you have the pads or the knuckles of your 4th long finger. So you have on the left 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You have 12 space holders on your long fingers of one hand. Once you reach that 12, you use your other hand, your right hand, to hold that position 5 times. So 12 times 1 is 12. And then when you get to 12 again on your left hand, you hold up your second finger. 12 plus 12 is 24. 24 plus 12 is 36. 36 plus 12 is 48. And 48 plus 12 is 60. Every 12 that you know of in your life, a dozen eggs, dozen donuts, 12 hours in a day, 12 saints, 12 disciples, 12 inches to a foot, came from this counting system. And all the 60s that we deal with on our daily basis, geometry of 360-degree circle, measuring time around us globally, measuring our planet, the way scientists and boat captains and airplane pilots measure it, that 60 is all based on this counting system. So this becomes a major clue in our path of discovery. Where did this counting system come from? Well, we know. We know exactly where it came from and when. For most of the human story, life pre-6,000 years ago looked something like this: a hunter-gatherer existence. People were not farming, they were just going where there was food to eat. They had to go where there was fresh water to drink. They wore animal skins. They had very crude tools. Their shelter was very temporary and something they could transport. This is most life on the planet pre-6,000 years ago. But in one place, in one time on our planet, this showed up: a modern city. This is in Mesopotamia, in Samaria, and you're looking at multi-story buildings, you're looking at the world's first pyramidal structure called the ziggurat, the world's first sailboat, the world's first written language, the world's first wheeled and axled vehicle, loom to weave fabric, pottery wheel, plow, arch, things we use today. And this isn't, we're not talking about tweaking of technology. We're talking about the invention of technology, including the 1260 math system that we use today. Many books have been written about this moment in time in ancient Sumeria, saying civilization begins here. The modern human experience with written language, algebra, calculus, physics begins right here in this moment. And we can read their language. It's called cuneiform. There are libraries now that have cuneiform tablets. UCLA has roughly the equivalent of 12,000 of these small, like iPad tablets with this language that we broke the code of and can read. And we can read what they had to say. Where did you come up with all of this technology, language, and the math? They said, we did not. We were gifted this information by tall beings who came from the sky. Archaeologists want us to believe that these are just farmers celebrating the birth of agriculture, and they're carrying these little handbags. If you look at the far right guy or the far left guy, they're carrying these little pouches, and we have seen these tall, bearded beings holding these pouches at all these crazy sites around the world that confound us as how they were built, and yet we see these types of beings with these little bags. And our planet does some very specific things that would be observable from a distance. It has a spin rate. It's very specific. It has an orbit rate, 365 days a year. A day is one spin. 365 of those spins creates an orbit. But our planet does one other thing. It wobbles. These are non-arbitrary things. These are mechanical things that our planet does. Spins at a certain rate, orbits at a certain rate, and wobbles at a certain rate. Well, that wobble is the biggest gear. Imagine all those things as gears. Our spin rate of a day is a very small gear. Our orbit circling around the sun is a larger gear. But the largest gear on our planet that it does is this wobble. It takes 25,920 years to complete one full wobble. And imagine like a top that is beginning to slow down, and instead of being perfectly straight up and down, it starts to wobble a bit. Now, this wobble is what created a thing called the precession of the equinox, and it's how we get our astrological ages. But that 25920 becomes a very significant number. So let's take that number, 25920. That is a real non-arbitrary number. But now let's start using the sky visitor Sumerian math that was taught to us to count on our fingers. 25920 divided by Sumerian math incredibly equals Sumerian geometry if the circle is 360 degrees. This slide right here is the one that has physicists and mathematicians and professors totally scratching their head, because now you're talking about something that, while you might still want to argue it as arbitrary, it starts leaning into non-arbitrary because of how well it cross-checks itself. So the non-arbitrary wobble divided by Sumerian math equals Sumerian geometry. The first one, 2160, that's the sum total of a cube. 25920 divided by the second placeholder in your finger is 1080, an octagon. 25920 divided by 36 is 720. That's the sum total of a hexagon. 25920 divided by 48 is 540, the sum total of a pentagon. And then 25920 divided by 60 is 432, the mysterious number that Joseph Campbell found all over the world in these mythologies and temples and religious teachings. There's other crazy things here. Where did the second come from? How did we get the formula for a second? Well, we take 12 hours of day times 60 seconds times 60 minutes. Look at the number that it produces, 432, with 2 zeros behind it. 12 hours of night and times 60 seconds times 60 minutes. Again, 43,200 seconds of night. Total seconds in a day, that was gifted to us, that formula, by these Sumerians, 86,400. Well, if we use Sumerian miles, remember, not metrics, but miles, royal units, our sun's diameter in miles is a function of 864 with a bunch of zeros behind it, 864,000 miles across. Incredibly, our moon is exactly half of 432, 216 with 1 zero behind it. The moon's diameter in miles, Sumerian measuring system, is 2,160. This is where it gets really crazy. 432 times itself squared is 186,282 Sumerian miles per Sumerian seconds. The actual speed of light in miles per second is 186,624. That is a miscalculation rate almost unnoticeable, 0.001. If you square 431, you're nowhere in the neighborhood. If you square 433, you're nowhere in the neighborhood. You square 432, and you are virtually exactly the speed of light according to the measuring systems that were gifted to humanity by these so-called sky visitors 6,000 years ago. So the question we start asking ourselves is like, wow, here's a bunch of correlated information, coincidence off the chart. Is there a message that's trying to be conveyed? There absolutely is. We live in a harmonic universe. If geometry is the backbone of this energetic structure of our universe, and as we have found, the geometry reveals harmonics, then if we live in a geometric universe, we also live in a harmonic universe. And here's 3 harmonic triads that are perfect. They all go la, 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 most beautiful forms of music. In fact, you could almost think we have been programmed to recognize these tones played together as a clue that we're receiving information that is correct or makes us feel good. Let's look at nature. Let's look at the geometry of nature. Here's a shell. This pattern is called a Fibonacci spiral. This Fibonacci spiral is expressed all over the place in nature around us. It spins forward, it spins backwards, and then if it spins against itself, both forwards and backwards, you create a pattern called the pineal pattern. In pineal, the words pine cone and pineapple and pine tree, and you have a pineal gland in your brain, all has this exact pattern, and that is a Fibonacci spiral going one way against a Fibonacci spiral counter-rotating against it. It is virtually the architecture of most of life as we know of on this planet. Here's a same thing, spiral. Our galaxy, our Milky Way galaxy, is a Fibonacci spiral rather than very small, very large. So what if we took the mathematics of the Fibonacci spiral and applied frequency to those mathematic numbers? It would be very easy to do. Let's take the Fibonacci spiral that is all in nature, all the way out to galaxy size, and let's apply numbers to it. You start with a number. It doesn't matter what number you start with, but if you start here at you see the 144 down in the bottom right, that's just picking an arbitrary number. Like that's a signature frequency of a plant. And out of the moment that plant is birthed out of that right corner of that right-hand 144, 0 plus 144 is 144 again. 144 plus 144 is 288. 144 plus 288 is 432. 288 plus 432 is 720, and on into infinity. Well, if we play those tones, those mathematical placeholders as frequencies, incredibly, we're right back to numerically perfect harmonics. So now we're really on the path of some incredible discovery about the essence. And is there a reason to believe there is a harmonic essence to life on our planet? Absolutely, because we take the first steps of growth of a Fibonacci spiral that launches everything from small spirals to big. The first 6 steps will reveal that exact same harmonically perfect triad. So here's a document written 6,000 years ago. It's the Sumerian Kings List. So this is written in cuneiform 6,000 years ago. It is writing about these kings, these rulers that lived in the region for tens of thousands of years each before a great flood consumed the planet. What I found interesting is the first 3 kings lived for 288, 360, and 432 with zeros behind it. Literally encoded in this King's List, one of the most famous pieces of cuneiform on our planet that we have ever decoded, and the first 3 kings, the Holy Trinity, is the same harmonic numbers. And it's a different chord. It's 288, 360, 432. But the same mathematically perfect intervals between them. This is another incredible moment of realization that we have been actually gifted in hard copies, not just in stories, but in hard copies that lasted for 6,000 years, codes and keys that will get us back to these numerically perfect harmonics. Let's look at these sky visitors on this mural. This is a mural that has been shaved off of a wall in Sumeria. But let's look at these, what archaeologists tell us are farmers, with their little seed bags and standing by a plant, and that's the sun overhead. Up in the upper left of the slide, and the upper right, look at these two guys holding these pine cones, as archaeologists want us to believe. Well, 6,000 years ago, Samaria was a desert then, as it is now. There was no pine cones, but let's look really close at what he's holding. He's not holding a pine cone, he's holding the same thing that's in the Vatican, right dead center in the middle of the Vatican, looks like a pine cone. We see this pine cone atop the twin snakes, the caduceus, activating a pine cone. So what is it? That pine cone is our pineal gland. They are holding that pineal gland actually up against the head of the humanoid form in front of them, as if this machine is somehow doing something to these pine cones. Again, giving us a very visual clue of what might be happening. So the supposition is all this information, what could it be leading us to? The tone set and this awareness of geometry might be activating our pineal gland that's inside of every brain. Every mammal has a pineal gland, and it could be the basis for instinct in some mammals. It could be the basis for migration in some animals. But in humans, philosophers from René Descartes to modern artists like Alex Gray, who painted this, would say, no, the pineal gland is our antenna that is receiving information from the universe as to who and what we really are, and we've either been ignored it or it has been switched off, and we are in the process, these last 6,000 years, of trying to switch it on through the codes and the keys and the geometric riddles that were gifted to us. What happens when our pineal gland is activated? We become aware, we become conscious, and a symbol of consciousness in many cultures is the lotus flower. Another code or clue, perhaps, we've seen the lotus flower as a representation of awakening and enlightenment. Well, here's cymatics. Here's a scientific study of holding in a fluid, or you can even do it with loose grains of sand or powder, apply frequency to it, and you will get standing waveforms, and then you can take a picture of it and see this incredible geometry behind it. Well, I went to a cymatics lab, and I played the 3 tones of the Sumerian King's List and the frequency tones of sacred geometry. We played both. Look what they revealed. That is a still shot of the patterning that came through when we played the 288, 360, 432. The researchers that had been doing research with cymatics for years had never seen something like this. It is like 3D. It looks like a lotus flower. You can see petals hiding behind other petals deeper you go. They're like, this is incredible. And no one has seen something like this in cymatics research before. So here's another coincidental reason to believe that all of this imagery showing pineal patterning or the lotus flower with these frequency sets that were gifted to us is actually doing something like activating our pineal gland and allowing us to see this lotus of awareness. So my theory became that we might be living in a giant Earth-sized escape room. And if you're not familiar with what an escape room is, it's a form of entertainment. You go to a real location, you get locked into it with either yourself or a team, and clues are inside the escape room, but you don't even know what the clues are. You have to start researching things. So you'll see a clock, you see it says 4438. You might look for those numbers exposed somewhere else, but it's encoded with things that if you figure out all the clues and employ them correctly, solve the puzzles, you get to escape. It's like they were cheat codes provided to you in advance by the builders of the escape room to allow you to up level to the next level. And what I think we could be living in what many astrophysicists believe in, we're living in a holographic existence, and that we might have been getting numerical keys and codes and clues that will allow us to break through to the next level.
So